Hello again and welcome back to our course on PowerPoint 2013. In the previous section we looked at some of the preparation needed before giving a PowerPoint presentation. We talked about some of the situations in which you might give a PowerPoint presentation without actually providing or even using directly the PowerPoint file itself. But we're now talking about typical presentation preparation where the PowerPoint file itself is going to be used. Now, I've already talked about things like spelling and grammar checking and inspecting the document for certain types of information if at some stage the document is going to fall into other people's hands or at least other people's access. In this section we're going to look a little bit more at how to actually prepare to give the presentation and some of the factors that come into decisions about giving a presentation. And the first thing I want to do is to go to the Transitions tab. Now, many people set up transitions well before they get to the point of giving a presentation, but some people always review transitions just before they give a presentation. There are a number of reasons for this. One of them is that if you have a custom slideshow and you're only showing a certain number of slides, you may want to review the way that the transitions work, and also you may want transitions to work differently in different situations. So let me just talk briefly about what transitions are about. Basically, a transition is what happens when you change from one slide to the next. There are a number of available options, and perhaps if we look at one or two of those first to give you some idea. There is actually a gallery of transitions here, and if I were to choose, say, wipe as my transition, that gives you a preview of what wipe looks like. So let's go into reading mode. You can see, go to the next slide, nothing. When you apply a transition, it applies to the selected slide. So I only had slide 1 selected. If I'd selected, say, 3 slides and clicked on wipe, they would all get that transition. Or, even with just one selected, if I click on apply to all here in the timing group, it would apply to all. If I then go into reading mode, as I step through the slides, they all have that same transition. Now, there are many transitions available. There's a big gallery here of transitions that you can try. Some of them are quite complicated, like honeycomb. And depending on the one that you choose, so for instance if I take a fairly straightforward one like wipe, there may be effect options as well, in which I can choose in this case whether to wipe from right, top, left, bottom, or from one of the corners. Now, apart from the basic selection of transition, I can also choose whether to include sound, how long the transition should take, so I can change the duration if I'd like to make it slower or faster. And then finally on the right here I can also say with a presentation whether I want slides to advance on a mouse click or the equivalent of a mouse click, or whether I want the slide to advance after a set amount of time. Now, as we'll see, there are different ways in which you might run a PowerPoint presentation, including automated ways such as self-running presentations, when timing things is critically important. I'm going to leave this presentation set on mouse click at the moment. I'm going to switch off sound, and I'm just going to leave the duration at 1.5. Now, what I'd like to do is to go back to the slideshow tab again. I'm now going to assume that I've put my transitions into place. That's all set up exactly the way I want it to be. And now I'm going to look at set up slideshow. Now, to some extent I've got a couple of other things that I need to do before I'm actually ready to present the show, as you'll see in a moment. But I want to look at setup show now because it will highlight a few of the other factors that we need to take into account. Now, first of all, in the top left, the show type. Is it presented by a speaker in full screen? Is it browsed by an individual in a window? Or is it browsed at a kiosk in full screen? Now, these are very different situations because, for example, if an individual is going to browse a presentation, They may go backwards and forwards, they may want buttons that link from part of the presentation to another. And obviously the capability to do that needs to be built into the presentation. But it also affects the way that we set up things like the transitions and the timings, and how much of it is automated and how much is not. There are also a number of options that are very important. For instance, loop continuously till escape. If you're going to have a presentation that, say, shows in some sort of kiosk, then you may want the presentation to just loop forever until somebody escapes out of it. You may want to show the presentation without any narration. As we'll see in a moment, you can record a narration and play that back if you want to. You may want to show it without animation. Again, it's an option to show it without animation. Then there are two other facilities we've got which we're going to look at in the next section, and they are pen color, where we can actually write on slides as we give a presentation, and we can also choose a laser pointer color as well. On the right we then have options for show slides, all slides, a selection of slides, or one of our custom shows. This current presentation has a custom show of school that I might choose to use. Do we want to advance the slides manually or using timings if present? And then we also have options for multiple monitors. And alongside multiple monitors, one of the more recent additions to PowerPoint, which is the use of presenter view. Now we're going to look at multiple monitors and presenter view in the next section and the one after that, but two or three of these options need further consideration. So let me cancel this, and we're going to turn our attention to rehearse timings. Now, rehearse timings lets you practice giving your presentation, but it will also time how long it takes you to go through each stage of the presentation. Once you get the timings right, you can then automate the running of the show. So consider this a step towards being able to automate the show rather than the whole thing. The other advantage of rehearsing timings is, even if you intend to continue to run the show manually yourself, at least you'll have a better idea of how long overall it's going to take you to give your presentation. So we've only got 8 slides in this presentation. Let's start a rehearsal of the timings. Now, as soon as the slideshow starts, I'm going to see a timer at the top there, recording each step as I make the presentation. I'm currently in slideshow view, so I'm seeing this exactly as it would appear. Because of the equipment I'm doing, which also has to be able to record not only what I'm doing but also me talking as well, I'm afraid the image is slightly stretched, but don't worry about that, because from the point of view of timings it doesn't make any difference to what you're actually seeing in terms of the functionality of PowerPoint 2013. What I'm going to do is, I'm controlling the presentation obviously by clicking the mouse. I'm going to run through the whole presentation, and PowerPoint 2013 is timing as I go, because I want to show you what happens at the end as well. So I'm going to click through it all fairly quickly. And then at the end we get this message: the total time for your slideshow was 1 minute 3 seconds. Do you want to save the new slide timings? Now, if I was happy with the way I'd presented this, I would probably save these timings, and this is the basis for automating this show. If I wanted to be able to automate the timing of the slides, then I could base it on the timings I've made here. Now clearly what I've just done, I've done very quickly, and they wouldn't really be very realistic timings, but I'm sure you can see how you could do this properly on the proper time, probably saying what you would intend to say at the same time, and get the timings much closer to a realistic amount. So let's save those slide timings. Now, having done that, and this is a really good one for you to try yourself, if you then go into Set Up Slideshow, make sure that under Advanced Slides the option Using Timings if Present is checked. Then if you actually run the slideshow, so you say Start Slideshow from Beginning, we're going to look at that option in the next section anyway, you will find that the slideshow will be presented automatically on the basis of the timings that you just recorded. But we can go one step farther than this, and that is also in the Setup group here, there is an option to record the slideshow, and with this option you can start recording from the beginning or start recording from the current slide, but it will also record narration as well. And if you're using the laser pointer, which we're going to look at a little bit later on, you'll also see that, and slide and animation timings will also be recorded and shown on playback. So as we've seen, if you want to find out how much time to allow for your slideshow, you can do rehearse timings. On the basis of that, you can also make your slideshow play automatically, or you can go one step further and record the slideshow including a narration and playback including the narration as well. And both of these are significant steps in the direction of automatic playback of your presentation, of producing self-running presentations. But one must never lose sight of the fact that sometimes you want to give presentations live, and in the next section we're going to start looking at how to actually give a presentation, and in particular at how to set up the equipment necessary to do that. But I have got one thing for you to do. I'd like you to use your equivalent of example 13, or example 13 if you don't have an equivalent, and I would like you to add slide transitions to every slide in the presentation. And not the same transition to every slide. I'd like the transition on slide 1 to be a fairly spectacular one. You saw the honeycomb one in this section. You might want to choose something of a similarly splendid nature. For all of the others, something that's not too showy, and preferably all of the other slides have the same transition. So just number 1, the first slide, different. My answer to that is example 14. I'll see you in the next section.